Lesson 4.3, Make Predictions. Now you can estimate an equation in y equal mx plus b for a trend line. Then use the equation to make predictions that are outside the scatter plot. If you're looking for a value that is on a scatter plot, if the trend line is on that section of the graph, then you can easily just look at the graph and determine a point the line might go through. But this method is to be used on points that fall outside of your graphed area, and it's simply going to be that you find the slope and the y-intercept of the line, and then you've got an equation that you can use to make a prediction with. Example 1 is about a tank volume in a water tank. We're given the time in minutes that it takes to fill water and the volume of, which is the amount of gallons of water that are in the tank after that amount of time. And so in your information, it says the graph shows the number of gallons of water in a large tank being filled. Predict how long it will take to reach 375 gallons of water. Well, I'm trying to make a prediction because if I look over here on this y-axis, 375 would be way off of this grid. So it's not reasonable to keep extending out this coordinate plane. If it were close, that would be a quick, reasonable way to figure that out, but it's not. So I'm going to write an equation. So to write an equation, first we find the slope, and in this case, we're going to pick 2 points on the coordinate plane. That I would try to choose 2 points that the line goes through, that it's really obvious that it goes through. That can be a little hard to find, but it clearly goes through, or it seems to go through 120, or about 125 really, and this point, which is about 170. So I'm going to use those points. 125 and 170. Now, if you were doing this on your own, you might get 2 slightly different points because sometimes it's hard to tell exactly what we're dealing with. But we're just going to go through and use those points with the slope formula. Or you could do rise over run. That would be fine as well. I think I'll go ahead and use the slope formula, but you could use rise over run. So m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. And I'll label these x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. So I get 170 minus 25 over 8 minus 1, which is 145 over 7. Now, I've been saying over and over and over again to be very exact, but this is a prediction. This equation is just an estimate, so you don't have to be exact on this. So when I go to a calculator, I end up with a decimal that keeps going, so it's about 20.7, and that's okay to use for slope. We can round on these, so I'm going to use about 20.7. The more decimal places you go, the more exact your equation might be, but since it's dealing with an estimate, it is okay to use just kind of an estimate of the line. Our second step, remember, is to find the y-intercept. Now, often we would go through, if we weren't given a graph, and we would use y equal mx plus b, plugging in slope and a point. But here we're given a graph. If I were to extend this out, we can tell that line appears that it would go very closely through the point 0, 0. That would make sense. There would be no water. At 0 minutes. Well, that's a reasonable number. So we can say that b is 0. So then our last step is just to write the equation. We always plug into y equal mx plus b. In this case, m is about 20.7 and b is 0. So we get the equation after we simplify of y equal 20.7x. So we've got our equation. So now we're ready to make a prediction. Let's read back through our problem. It says predict how long it will take to reach 375 gallons of water. I want you to notice two values. I want you to notice what it's asking for. It's asking for how long it will take, the amount of time it will take. Time is represented on this graph by x, because we see it's labeled as time. So x is time, and that's what we're looking for. And it tells us that it's to reach 375 gallons of water. 375 gallons, that's represented by y. That's the volume in gallons. So y is 375. So I'm going to plug those two values into my equation. Y is 375, and then x is our unknown. So we just end up with a little one-step equation. We're going to solve this for x because we're looking for x, the amount of time or how long it takes to reach 375 gallons. So I just divide both sides by 20.7. And I get the value of x, and it comes out to a decimal that keeps on going, and since we're dealing with an estimate, we could say it's about 18. So it takes about 18 minutes for the water to reach 375 gallons.